Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Thomas Hubert, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Coming up on the show this week,
we have water inside the pocket of water the cow lay on, and this pocket we can cool down with the circulation.
It's not only beer they make in Denmark, cattle mats as well, and they are probably the best in the world. And
what often gets shoved down the list is yourself, and you have to be in good nick before you can overcome challenges that are lashed at you. So
Dublin footballer Kevin McManamon has mental health advice for farmers. But first, the fallout from the new maps of areas of natural constraint published last week is becoming clearer. Some farmers are finding out that they are now eligible to the scheme, while others are told they are being moved out. You can check the status of your own townland on our website at ifj.ie/ANC. Those who are not happy with the decision will have a chance to appeal, and a group of farmers on the Laois-Kildare border have already decided to use that option. I met one of them, Henry McLaughlin from Ballybritus.
Well, we came together there as a group of farmers there with land along the River Barrow from Monstreven to Vickerstown, where we're suffering from severe flooding. It's a floodplain. We've flooding every year. The flooding has got much worse in recent years since the disbanding of the Barrow drainage and the opening of the new motorway there, the N7, and our flooding, can happen at any time of the year. It's flash flooding. It happened last year, Storm Ophelia there, when Mount Mellick was flooded. The water came straight down from the Slieve Looms down to us. We can have 3 foot of water across the land there at any time, any month of the year. Some of the biggest floods we've had have been in the month of August. We've suffered crop losses, and the last time the review was done was 1992 for the disadvantaged area, and we lost out on that. We weren't included, and we waited 27 years to be included, and we came together as a group of farmers. We hired an agricultural consultant. He put together a submission for us, outlining all the different maps showing the River Barrow and the extent of the flooding, the soil types. We matched all the criteria nearly, and we sent it to the Department of Agriculture, and the results come out now that we've been turned down, and that we will be regrouping there now. We will be appealing. We'll be appealing to the Appeals Council, and we'll be, hopefully we'll be successful with an appeal, because these reviews only happen so few and far between. This is a chance for us, and we'll be consulting with local politicians, highlighting our case.
How many farmers are in your group, and what kind of a difference would it make for them?
Look, it would make a small difference. It would be a payment which we would receive for the ANC. It would be a small payment on a yearly basis. It would help out when crop losses and crop damage happens so severely there to us. And there's about 40 farmers in the group. We're all affected with the same situation, and it's a portion of land between the Barrow River, and the canal, the Grand Canal, between Monstreven and Vickerstown.
That was Ballybritus farmer Henry McLaughlin. Farmers, milk processors, vets and the Department of Agriculture agreed this week to roll out a control programme for Jonas disease in dairy herds for the next 4 years. Meanwhile, our beef editor, Adam Woods, was at the AgriScot show in Scotland, where a similar programme is already helping farmers battle the disease. There he met George Caldo, a vet who is an expert on the issue, and he first asked him what exactly is Jonas.
Jonas disease is a slowly developing disease which affects mainly the intestinal tract of cattle, which causes them to waste because they can't digest their food properly, and they lose a lot of nutrients in their faeces, and they have diarrhoea. The disease is spread from the faeces to the calves. Most of the animals are infected very young, and it takes several years before the signs of the disease become apparent.
So it's quite a difficult disease to eradicate. It's quite a complicated disease.
It's complicated not only because of the length of time it takes to develop. It's complicated because the diagnostic tests are not very good at picking up the disease in the early stages, good in the later stages, and it's complicated because other ruminants also get the disease. So if you have cattle and sheep together, sheep can be a source of infection for cattle, and most people don't recognise the disease in sheep because it's just seen as thin ewes at culling time.
So you initiated an eradication programme here in 1998. How is that going, or how is that progressing?
Well, the checks programme has the part that we run. We have 2,400, I think it is, members, of which 36% are at the lowest risk level. That's to say the cattle are the cleanest, and we overall have 57% of the herds are tested clear at the present time. So my take on that is that the programme is extremely successful. It involves developing a health plan to minimise the risk of spread of infection on the farm, and annual testing to ensure that all animals over 2 years of age are tested and any positives are removed, along with their most recent calf.
How have those farms come to be at level 1, we'll say? What practices have they implemented on their farm? Is it particularly through culling, or is it through other practices?
I think that by culling alone, testing and culling alone, you make a lot of progress and you'll get rid of the clinical disease, but you'll need the culling plus the health plan to get to the situation where you reach the lowest risk level.
In terms of, I suppose, compulsory testing, are there any plans for the future in Scotland as regards making the disease notifiable or compulsory testing for all herds?
There aren't any. There is some degree of compulsion developing within the dairy sector because some of the milk contracts are requiring people to be involved in the programme. The idea of a national eradication programme is in the minds of many of the cattle breeders in the country, but it's such a difficult disease that I wouldn't be advising people to take that route. And it's difficult because of the reasons that I've already suggested. So it would take a lot of resource. Now, what we can see is that for those herds that do become involved in the programme, there are real financial benefits to controlling Yorley's disease, whether you're just interested in it from a production point of view and maintaining your profits that way, or whether you're looking to get assurance of freedom for selling of pedigree animals. In both, there will be gains made.
Do you think will processors in the future, maybe dairy processors or beef processors, will say imply that herds need to be tested because of the links maybe to human health?
I think that the dairy within the UK, the dairy industry is already fairly well advanced in that direction. I don't think it will impact on the beef sector in the same way.
Scottish vet George Caldo with Adam Woods at AgriScot there. Staying with the inner workings of cattle, what's the latest research on the performance of sexed semen? The Irish Farmers Journal's dairy editor Jack Kennedy was at the Teagasc Dairy Conference on Tuesday, and he spoke with Teagasc researcher Stephen Butler, who has just worked on trials to compare conventional AI with sexed semen.
Okay, so overall the conception rate with conventional semen was about 60%, and overall the conception rate with sexed semen was about 45%. So that gave us a relative conception rate figure of 76% overall. Now we had two different types of bulls in that. We had bulls that were actually located at a sorting lab, and we had bulls that were located in Ireland, that were collected in Ireland, and they were shipped same day to a sorting lab in the UK. And overall, the bulls that were resident appeared to have better performance. They had a relative conception rate of 84%, and the bulls that were shipped had a relative conception rate of 70%. So it's hard to know from that data, is that a real effect of shipping, or was it just the bulls that were involved, or was it just an artifact of relatively small numbers of inseminations? But it would tell you that there's a big variation in how bulls performed.
So it's fair to say, Stephen, those resident bulls, those bulls that were in the place, in the location all the time, no shipping of sperm, etc., that they performed, very close to maybe what you'd expect. I mean, 84%, you were looking for 90%, so they were very close maybe to the target.
Yeah, and certainly the company that do the sorting, I mean, that is their core business. It's bulls that are located, all their studs are all of the sorting labs are located at or near a bull stud. So this shipping of ejaculates isn't part of the core business, and it's possible that is not as well developed as the procedures that have been put in place for bulls that are resident. again, with the data we have, it's impossible to say that definitively, but that certainly seems to be the case.
So what would be the next steps if you were to try and kind of get every trial raises new questions, and I mean, you have a question there over timing of AI and timing of insemination on farms, etc. I mean, if you were to look at a kind of another trial, the next trial leading on from this, what would be kind of, as you see it, would be the next piece of work that needs to be done?
So we know from a lot of historical research that conventional semen survives in the reproductive tract for about 24 hours. Some bulls longer, some bulls a little bit shorter, but on average it's more than 24 hours. But we also know that sex semen is a much more fragile product. It's to some extent you can say that it's damaged, but it doesn't survive for 24 hours in the female reproductive tract. So if you know that the lifespan of this semen product is shorter in the reproductive tract, you need to be a lot more vigilant about the timing of AI. So most AI is conducted once a day in Ireland now. Certainly technician services once a day. A lot of DIY farmers do once a day, but that's not going to work. The way you normally use conventional semen is not going to work for sex semen. You need to be a lot more focused on the timing, allowing a greater time from onset of heat to when the cow is actually inseminated. And I think, in other countries where they use timed AI on both cows and heifers, they are getting to that 90% relative conception rate target. Now, if it's happening somewhere else, it should happen here too. And I think the big difference in seasonal calving systems, where we do this AI based on observed heat, which is great that we can do that, but we need to be more vigilant about the timing of heat onset and adjust accordingly when cows get inseminated with sex semen. So inseminate later, 14 to 20 hours after heat onset would be a good guess as to the optimum. But we need to do some research to verify that.
I mean, Stephen, is it fair to say after this trial has been completed that, okay, you're disappointed that sex semen the results haven't been as good as maybe you would have expected at the start of the trial, or that you would have targeted at the start of the trial, but is there still some light for sex semen as an option for Irish dairy farmers going forward?
Well, based on the results of this, you really have to drill into the data to find the positive picture, which is that for some herds it actually performed better. Sex semen did perform better than conventional semen in about a quarter of the herds on the study. So certainly there's something to be learned from that. What procedures will, or what methods of heat detection and so on will allow you to achieve those gains with sex semen. But ultimately we still need to get to a situation where there's a semen sorting lab in Ireland. Then all of our bulls are resident, and it allows much more access for the bulls in the country. So all of the bulls that are, the top bulls in the active bull list could potentially become available, and that's a big tipping point for farmers to actually start using it. They want to use the best bulls, but if the best bulls aren't available sex, then they're not going to use sex semen. That's a current big barrier. So that's the situation.
Stephen Butler of Teagasc there, sounding a note of optimism at the end of this report by Jack Kennedy. Stay with us. After this break, we're taking you to Denmark.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
My colleague Hannah Quinn Mulligan is at Agromech this week. That's the largest indoor agricultural show in the world. That's the largest indoor agricultural show in Europe, and it's taking place in Denmark with countless innovations for farmers to choose from. If your animals are now going into the shed and you're worried they won't be comfortable, you can of course get slat mats. Then you can also go one step further, as Klaus Nielsen of Danish company Stald explains.
We have the water mattress with the circulation of the water to cool the cow down.
So inside the mat itself, you have water and you can pump water inside the mats.
Yeah, we have water inside the pocket of water the cow lay on, and this pocket we can cool down with the circulation.
And how many mats have you installed? What's the reaction been from farmers?
We have two kinds of water mattress. We have with cooling and without cooling, and the new one is with the cooling system. And we have only now sold the first system, but the other one we have without the cooling. We have installed around 8,000 places now in Denmark. So.
And I suppose Denmark, like a lot of Europe, was burnt up by the drought, so that had an impact on milk yield, obviously. So are there any stats or figures around the impact on milk yield? Can it make a difference? Is it profitable for farmers?
Yeah, there is some study that shows that when it's a warm period, we have this year a very warm period in Denmark, that the milk production, when it's warm, will go down with 3.7 liter per cow per day. So we can increase the milk production with the cooling of the cow.
And how much would one mat cost, or how do you install them, or do you sell them in bulk?
When we sell the product, it's with the heat exchanger, including the price. And one place of 1 meter and 20 cost around, I think, 300 euros. And that's also including the aqua board. It's a water pipe in the front to keep the cow laying so it don't shit in the mattress.
And is it expensive to run? I mean, heating water, cooling water, is that bit expensive?
Actually, you can collect the heat of the cow from the mattress.
Wow, crossing slat mats and radiators. I wouldn't have thought of that. A more pressing issue for Irish agriculture, though, could come from upcoming restrictions on the sale of antibiotics from EU legislation. Denmark has long been very strict on this. Vets have been banned from selling antibiotics to farmers for nearly 25 years. Hannah asked a Danish vet how this works.
My name is Paul Bækbo. I'm a veterinarian with a diploma in porcine health management. I'm working for the Danish company Seges, which is the advisory and research organization of Danish farmers.
And you just gave a very interesting presentation on antibiotics. But first of all, could you just say what happened in 1994? The rules changed around vets and what they were able to do and prescribe for farmers or sell to farmers.
Yes, back in 94, the authorities saw that there was a steep increase in the use of antibiotics, and they made new legislation telling that no vets were able to earn any longer on the selling of antibiotics. So from one day to the other, half of their income actually disappeared. And since then, it has been as such, no vet are allowed to earn on antibiotics. So they just do a prescription to the farmer go to the pharmacy and buy the antibiotics him or herself.
That will blow some farmers' minds back in Ireland to think that they can't use their vet to get their antibiotics. But as well as that, you have something called VetStat. Could you just explain what VetStat is?
Yes, very shortly, VetStat is a database where all the use of antibiotics for farming animals are going into this database on a monthly flow. So the data goes from the pharmacy, where the farmer buys his antibiotics, into this database. So we know each month how much has been prescribed to all farms in Denmark.
And who can look at that database? If I was a regular citizen, could I apply to look at that database and see how much a farmer next to me was using, how much antibiotics?
Yeah, actually for the last couple of years it has been a fully transparent system, in a sense that all Danish citizens can get access to data on all farms and on all veterinarians.
Okay, some people might think that is invasive. I don't know, but but I mean, your presentation focused on antibiotics and pigs, and it highlighted, I think, that 3 out of 4 of the antibiotics used in Denmark was on pig production. Is that seen as a problem in Denmark?
Yeah, in a sense that we want to even reduce our consumption anymore on a national scale. So we are working hard to see how can we, in a broad sense, have new production technologies that allow us not to use even less antibiotics to produce 1 kilogram of pig.
And your presentation highlighted that it was younger pigs in particular who were soaking up all these antibiotics, and that 70% of the antibiotics prescribed was for diarrhea. And what you did was you pulled out zinc out of weaning the pigs and you replaced it with other things to see if that would work. And one of the things was Irish seaweed, and I noticed, but that was found not to be very effective. So what did the findings find anyway about zinc and the need for it in a young pig diet?
Yeah, still we see it as a necessary technology to wean healthy piglets. But in the next 4 years we need to come up with alternatives. So we are right now testing a lot of different feeding compositions and you might say add-ons if they can, at least in a combination, be as efficient as medical zinc.
We're becoming more aware of antimicrobial resistance and there are fears around that, and you pointed out that Denmark has reduced its antibiotic usage for animals by almost 15% since 2015. Do you see that as a success, but do you think you need to build on that?
Yeah, I will say it's a success, but now it becomes more and more difficult because we are already on a very low use of antibiotics, so even to reduce it further will be much more challenging, so to speak.
Another area of common interest between Ireland and Denmark is clover, which is increasingly used in grass swards here to provide protein. Hannah asked Eric Fogg of the farm advisory co-op Seges for an update on the latest Danish experiments with the crop.
If you want to reduce the dependency of imported protein, it's an obvious possibility that you can extract the protein from the grass. And I think in Ireland, where you have so much grass, it's really an obvious way to do. And if we can show a profitable way of this production, of course it's a little costly to make all this production or this processing, but I think we have solved, at least for organic feed, that it can compete with imported soy protein.
And we're talking about clover, aren't we, primarily?
Yes, we have tried with pure clover, and we have tried with alfalfa and grass clover mixtures, and we find that it's more or less the same productivity and the same protein yield. And we think it's the easiest way to have a productive grass clover mixture.
So it's compared to, say, traditional protein crops, say peas or alfalfa or something like that, you're saying that clover would be easier to grow for farmers?
Yes, and compared to peas, we have a much higher production per hectare of protein.
And what are the studies around this? Because you've been working with, is it Aarhus University and Copenhagen University?
We have a cooperation with Aarhus University. Seges is owned by the farmers' organization. So we represent the farmers and we cooperate with the scientists to find the right solution.
And you were saying some figures that would be interesting for us in terms of milk yield and production. So you took out, was it the soy protein element in dairy cow feed and you replaced it with grass protein, was that it?
This was done by the Aarhus University, and they exchanged the traditional grass silage with silage from this the pressed cake from the protein production. And even if we have drawn out 1/3 of the protein from the grass, the pressed cake actually seems to be even better than the grass silage. And the cows, they performed very well, and they actually gave more milk with this pressed cake silage.
Did you say, was it 2 kilos per cow more?
Approximately 2 kilos per hectare, per day per cow. So it was quite remarkable positive results.
But you were looking at this as well, not just for dairy cows, but for pig production and poultry production. So what were kind of the interesting kind of facts and figures around that?
Yeah, we have found that the protein we extract from the grass is a very valuable protein for both pigs and poultry. And we expect it could even be used for human consumption.
That was Senior Organic Advisor Eric Fogg, ending this report by Hannah Quinn Mulligan at AgroMech.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now let's go back to Scotland, where Irish Farmers Journal buildings reporter William Conlon met Jamie Robertson. Jamie is a sort of guru when it comes to cattle housing, and he works for livestock management systems in Aberdeen. William asked him for the top problems he has seen with Irish sheds.
Number one, you need to open the sheds up, but protect them from the wind and the rain. Sounds a conflict there, and that's what you've got. You've got many sheds that are too tight in the sidewall, and they need to be opened up, but in such a way that we don't get a whole load of moisture inside the building. What you need is Yorkshire board, not space-board. We can have a laugh about that later, but that would be the first thing. Because if you don't open up the building, say on the southwest side, then what you're also saying from a business point of view is that I don't want free ventilation for 50 to 60% of the year. And that's daft. That's completely daft. So we need to get the buildings opened up more whilst keeping the rain out. Internally, we need to tighten up on drainage. Keeping control of moisture within a shed is a way of making it feel less cold and is practically less dirty because the moisture turns into dirt very rapidly. So I'd go for that. And then every livestock building needs a hole in the roof, which again might be counterintuitive, but it's quite simple. For anything other than calves, we need what's called the stack effect, and what we need to do is have a hole in the roof suitable for the number of animals in the building. Again, this has all been understood for 30 plus years. It needs to be applied properly. So that's three things. The fourth thing is for young stock, we're massively missing a trick, although batch calving is in some ways inherently safer, but hygiene. If scour is the main reason for mortality and morbidity in Ireland for calves less than 4 weeks of age, then I'm suggesting that maybe lack of decent and effective hygiene is one of the reasons for that. And then finally, again, ironically enough, in a country that's well known for its water all over the place, I think the water is, in terms of in front of cattle and young stock, is something that is actually could do with a bit more detail. We don't pay enough attention to that. All young stock should have water in front of them, in terms of calves on milk.
Is it that there's not enough water, or is it that there's often stale water or dirty water?
Both. So we need to be very clear that milk is nutrition and water is water. So water is an absolute requirement to drive dry matter intake to help the early rumen development. That's a well-proven fact. And certainly by the time a calf's getting to be, 12 weeks old, it needs a substantial amount of water intake. So to answer your question there, it can be access. So for very young calves, quite often, they don't even have any water, because they've got milk. They don't need water. That's nonsense. We also have, as you quite kindly point out, is it quality issues? Well, again, we have quality issues. It's a lot easier for a person to put 10 litres in a blue plastic bucket in front of a calf, because it find that will last 4 or 5 days, and in fact it will last forever, because by the time it's half drunk it's actually shite, and then the calf is put off the drinking of it. They should have fresh water in front of them. That means twice a day, small quantities. There are also issues which I think perhaps we're only beginning to understand, that there's water quality as in literally hardness and therefore palatability, the amount of feces floating around in it, which is palatability before we even get to other pathogens in there that we don't need. TVCs, that's the sort of general bacteriological load. Do we need that? But there's also a small but significant number of water sources going onto farms where, if you actually analyse it, you're looking at maybe elevated levels of, so far it's sulfates, nitrates or iron, which are known to cause at least performance losses, and sometimes significant health losses too. So I think those will be my key areas. One, you need to open up the sidewalls whilst keeping the rain out.
Do you see vented sheeting as being kind of a barrier in a lot of not working well, I suppose?
I think the vented sheet, as in if it's basically of quite a low porosity, so the common green vented punch sheet that we see here in the UK, it's less than 5% of it as a whole, and I mean it doesn't actually supply enough inlet area. It's great on a dirty night, it will slow the air down and it will keep the rain out, but it's not technically competent according to the rules of sort of physics and thermodynamics. It can be utilised, it can be helped. But all the answers to these problems are actually discovered quite a long time ago, and what we need to do is to apply them. There's a whole load of, on the young stock side, there's a whole load of calf facilities that really need to be thrown in the bin, covered in paraffin and ignited, because they're not cleanable. So that comes back to materials being used. If people find it difficult to get rid of Coxy or Cryptosporidium, then maybe we need to stand back and saying, well, are we applying ourselves to this task in a way that we can expect to get rid of Coxy or Crypto? And I'm looking at it with a scientist's hat and saying, you don't stand a hope in hell until you throw away those 30, 40-year-old wooden pen divisions that are covered in grime. It's daft.
Yeah, and there's a lot of old sheds as well that were never meant to be used for calves that are now holding calves across the country, and you're only asking for trouble, I suppose.
That's right. And I mean, but then there's lots of, we can lift what we've got if we're honest and objective about what we're looking at. So it's a piece of kit that in Ireland, all buildings you needed and used for calf housing for 12 weeks a year, they all need a ventilation system, because unless you're lucky enough, you're unlucky enough to be in a place where the wind never stops blowing, then during those lulls in the wind, you've got calves in the building, and the accumulation of moisture and bacteria and viruses will be quite rapid, because not only is there no ventilation from the wind, but there will be no stack effect either. And so you need a fan and a duct, and it's going to cost you £1,000-1,200 and £1 a day to run. Now, if people view that as only a cost, that's one of the reasons they're in the problems they are. If you view £1,200 and £1 a day to run as an investment, you just need to ask yourself, how many calves have I got? Over the last few years, how many calves am I injecting per 100 calves? And do the financial sort of maths on that to see, well, am I going to get payback? And the levels of pneumonia and early losses are sufficiently high that there's loads of scope for that kind of investment.
That was Scottish farm buildings expert Jamie Robertson speaking with William Conlon. Kevin McManamon is a well-known Dublin footballer, but he's also a psychologist working in sports and other high-performance environments. On Tuesday, he gave a talk on mental health to 400 farmers in Granard-Mart in County Longford. Adam Woods was there, and he caught up with Kevin just before he entered the ring.
It's a small bit about my own journey in football and how I maybe would have navigated some of the challenges, particularly getting stretched from getting pushed out of my comfort zone every day when I got onto the Dublin team, and then just sharing a few ideas around what high performers do, how they plug in, working on themselves, so that they can give a lot to others and they can give a lot to their profession or their day-to-day life. You know what I mean?
I suppose dealing with adversity, 2018 has been a really, really tough year on farmers, and there's some farmers getting it really tough at the moment in terms of bills mounting coming into winter. It's not a good time of year in terms of mental health anyway. Yeah. Any advice to farmers out there that are finding it really tough at the moment in terms of making ends meet, maybe haven't told family because of pressure there? Like, what can you say to them in terms of getting through that?
Yeah, I suppose it can be a tricky one, and because it's so individual. And I think when farmers are getting hit from all angles, it's kind of like spinning plates, trying to keep them all up at the one time. And it's what popped into my head is about prioritisation. You know, that's the big one in terms of juggling all the stuff that we have going in our lives and picking the ones that are most important for today. But I think what often gets shoved down the list is yourself, and you have to be in good nick before you can overcome challenges that are lashed at you. So that's the one thing is actually that we're going to talk about tonight, is about how do we work on ourselves? How do we make sure that our batteries are charged as high as they can before we go out and face the day, or go out and face the week, or go out and face the messy challenges that we have in front of us.
In terms of, I suppose, farming is male dominated, do you find any difference in your day-to-day, we'll say, job as regards dealing with men as opposed to women? We'll say they have the story that they're not as good at opening up about feelings and maybe talking to people. Is that the way, we'll say, you know, it's going to be even more of an issue in the farming community because it's so male dominated?
Yeah, it can be. It can be more difficult at times, you know, with men, because we kind of have rules a bit as blokes. Like, you know, we're not allowed to do a certain amount of things, and it takes us years to build up this manhood and seconds to lose if you show a bit of weakness type thing. And I don't agree with it. But at the same time, when you build trust with people, you know, and if you're talking to the right person, you know, you can have a genuine conversation. They can take off the armour for an hour or two, and then they can put it back on. A lot of people think when you show weakness or vulnerability or what you're truly experiencing in your head, they think that that's it, and they've been caught out type thing. But you can take the armour off and put it back on again. And I think probably a lot, like you said, a lot of men are looking to do that. Yeah. A lot of women just the same. Yeah. But it does catch you. Your point about men being less likely, it does catch a lot of the themes that I would experience in work, you know.
Just finally, give me 2 top tips. We'll say you're dealing with top performers every day. We deal with farmers every day who want to be top performers. Give me 2 top tips that we'll say just life tips in terms of being at the top of your game in any business at all. Give me 2 top tips. What you need to do.
It's a great question. You stumped me. What I would say, and I'm going to chat a little bit this tonight, is being aware and getting to know your inner critic. You know, we all have a little voice that chops us down, or that tells us all the stuff we've done wrong. It can be really beneficial at times, but a lot of the time we overdo it, and it can chip away at our confidence. So
a bit of self-belief.
Well, it's not self-belief, but it's a little bit more about watching the stuff that actually chops you, watch the stuff that gets rid of your self-belief, or that maybe makes you question yourself. So watching the negative voice when you're trying something new, or you're doing something that's challenging, or whether you're doing something that makes you nervous or anxious, watching that inner critic, I suppose, would probably be the first one. And then, as we touched on, it's about having genuine conversations. With a lot of the time, people we are reluctant to do. You know, like one of the stories I'll tell later on is I had stuff going on in my head for 3 years and never told anyone.
Okay.
And finally, I got this real release, actually explaining what was actually experiencing, how it was impacting my performance in sport, how it was impacting my performance in work, how it was impacting my performance in life. You know, how happy I was. Eventually, it was a bit of a nice reward for finally, Jesus, I just felt like I got a load off me mind. So I would speak about having courageous conversations would be probably the second tip. So
talk is good.
Talk is good, and so is self-talk as well.
That's it from this week's podcast. To make sure you don't miss an episode, you can subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. And of course, follow our social media channels, our news app, and our website at farmersjournal.ie. Plus, there's more on all these stories in the paper this Thursday. The sound engineer this week was Ferdia Mooney. From me, Thomas Hubert, have a good farming week and talk to you soon.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.